The great station called Harmony's Cradle floated in the darkness between stars. It was old, very old. For 3,000 years, the Galactic Council had met here to discuss matters of war and peace, trade and treaties. 12 species sat at the great circular table, and their word was law across 100,000 worlds. Today, they had gathered to discuss a problem. The problem was called humanity. Ambassador Hex of the Hegemony stood at his place at the table. His body was covered in hard black plates, and his 4 eyes gleamed with cold intelligence. He was 700 years old, and he had seen many young species rise and fall. Humanity, he believed, would be no different. "They have sent another petition," he said, his translator turning his clicking speech into words the others could understand. "They wish to join the council as associate members." A ripple of amusement passed through the chamber. The delegate, a creature of flowing water contained in a mechanical suit, let out a bubbling laugh. The representative, tall and thin with skin like tree bark, shook his head slowly. "How long have they been in space?" asked High Arbiter. The Arbiter was the oldest being in the room. Their body was made of living crystal, and light moved through them like blood. They had led the council for 800 years. 3 centuries, Hex answered, perhaps a little more. 3 centuries. His voice rang like a struck bell. The required 2,000 years before they were considered for membership, the 1,500, and these humans believe 3 centuries is enough. "They are an impatient species," said the delegate. "Short-lived. They burn bright and die fast. It makes them hasty." Hex pulled up a holographic display. It showed a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star. "This is they call it Earth." The council studied the image. The planet was beautiful in its way, but the data that scrolled beside it told a different story. Massive volcanic activity, extreme temperature variations, predators in every environment, bacteria and viruses that could kill in hours, radiation from their own star that damaged their cells. "How did they survive?" the delegate asked, genuine curiosity in their bubbling voice. "We do not know," Hex admitted. "By all logic, they should have died out long ago. They have no natural armor, no venom, no telepathy. They cannot regenerate limbs. They require sleep for a third of their short lives. They are, by every measure, weak." "And yet they reach for the stars," said softly. "They reach too far." Hex closed the display with a gesture. "I recommend we deny their petition. Let them prove themselves over the next 1,000 years. If they survive, we can discuss membership then." The other delegates murmured their agreement. This was the way of things. Young species had to earn their place. They had to show patience, wisdom, and strength. Humanity had shown none of these things. "We should at least hear them," said. "It is tradition to allow a species to speak before we render judgment." Hex clicked his mandibles in irritation, but he could not argue with tradition. "Very well. I will send them coordinates. They may send a diplomatic vessel." The message was transmitted across the vast distances of space. It was formal and cold, as such messages always were. It informed humanity that they would be granted an audience before the council, and that they should send a representative ship to the provided coordinates. The response came quickly, too quickly, Hex thought. Humans were always in such a hurry. "Acknowledged," the message read. "The UES Prometheus will arrive at the designated coordinates. We appreciate the council's time." Hex searched the human registry for a ship called Prometheus. He found nothing. This was not unusual. Young species built new ships all the time. They probably named it after some figure from their mythology. Humans were sentimental that way. He imagined a small diplomatic frigate, perhaps 100 meters long. It would be clean and new, painted in bright colors to impress. The humans would probably decorate it with flags and symbols. They would send their best diplomats wearing their finest clothes. They would make speeches about friendship and cooperation. And the council would listen politely, and then they would vote no. It was always the same. In the days before the human ship arrived, the Council conducted other business. They negotiated trade agreements between the. They discussed the expansion of hyperspace lanes through neutral territory. They debated the proper response to a series of pirate attacks on the Outer Rim. Normal matters, boring matters. The human petition was nearly forgotten. Spent their private hours studying humanity more closely. Something about them troubled the High Arbiter, though they could not say what. The data was clear. Humans were weak, short-lived, and young. They had no special abilities, no great weapons, no vast fleets. Their territory was small, confined to a few dozen systems on the edge of known space. And yet they had spread so quickly. In 3 centuries, they had claimed more worlds than they had in 2,000 years. How? They had no advantages. They should have been easy prey for the dangers of space. Found no answers in the data. Perhaps there were none to find. Perhaps humans were simply lucky. On the day of the audience, the council gathered in the great chamber. The circular table gleamed under soft light. Each delegate sat in their designated place, wearing their finest ceremonial garments. This was a formal occasion, even if the outcome was already decided. Hex had prepared a speech. It was kind but firm. He would thank the humans for their petition. He would praise their ambition. And then he would explain gently that they were not ready, perhaps in 1,000 years, perhaps in 2,000. The council was patient. The humans should be patient too. He practiced the speech in his mind as he waited. The censor officer on duty was a young named Ra. She had been assigned to monitor the approach of the human vessel. It was supposed to be simple duty. Diplomatic ships were small and slow. They announced themselves well in advance. There was never any surprise. Ra was the first to see the readings. At first she thought her equipment was broken. She ran a diagnostic, then another, then a third. The equipment was working perfectly. She opened a channel to the council chamber with shaking hands. Her voice cracked as she spoke the words that would change everything. High Arbiter, ambassadors, the human ship has entered sensor range. Excellent, Hex replied. Guide them to the designated docking port. Ambassador, Ra's voice was barely a whisper. I do not think they will fit. The council chamber fell silent. Hex stared at the communication panel as if it had spoken in a language he did not understand. Explain, he said. Ra's voice trembled through the speakers. The energy signature, ambassador, it is. I have never seen anything like it. The spatial displacement is equivalent to a small moon entering. Our sensors cannot fully map it. It is too large. Too large. The delegate leaned forward, water swirling inside their containment suit. What do you mean, too large? It is a diplomatic vessel. I am sending the visual feed now. The great holographic projector at the center of the council table flickered to life. For a moment, there was only stars, the familiar darkness of space, peaceful and empty. Then the image shifted, and the projector showed what the sensors had found. Nobody spoke. The ship that hung in the void was not a diplomatic vessel. It was not a cruiser or a battleship or a carrier. Those words were too small. This was something else entirely. This was a mountain made of metal and fire. 12 kilometers. The display showed the measurements, but the numbers meant nothing. The council had no frame of reference. The largest warship in the fleet was 2 kilometers long, and it had taken 50 years to build. This human vessel was 6 times that size. Its hull was dark gray, the color of storm clouds. Layers of armor plating covered every surface, thick and heavy, and the scars were everywhere. Great burns from plasma weapons, craters from kinetic impacts, sections that had been torn away and replaced with different metal, different colors, as if the ship had been rebuilt again and again from the corpses of its enemies. Weapon systems bristled from every angle, batteries larger than the Council's patrol ships, missile tubes by the hundreds, energy projectors that pulsed with light even in standby mode. And hangars. So many hangars. The council could see smaller vessels moving inside them, and those smaller vessels were the size of destroyers. The ship was not beautiful. It was not elegant. It was brutal and functional and terrifying. It looked like something born from war, raised by war, and destined to die in war. But it had not died. That was the worst part. The scars proved that this vessel had faced weapons that should have destroyed it, and it had survived, again and again. "What is it called?" asked. Their crystalline voice was very quiet. Ra checked her readings. The human registry identifies it as the UES Prometheus. Classification: Titan-class battlecruiser. Titan-class. Hex repeated the words as if they were a curse. What does that mean? What class is below Titan? Unknown, Ambassador. Our records show no other human military vessels of this size. We assumed. We believed their largest ships were perhaps 500 meters. You believed wrong. The delegate rose from their seat and walked to the viewport. The Prometheus was visible now with naked eyes, a dark shape against the stars. It hung motionless in space, waiting. It has not powered weapons, they observed. It has not raised shields, it simply waits. Perhaps that is meant to comfort us, Hex said bitterly. Look at what we could do, but we choose not to. Is that the message? I do not know what the message is. Moved to stand beside the light from the distant sun passed through their crystal body, casting rainbows on the floor. But I know this. We have made an error, a terrible error. What error? We assumed we knew what humanity was. We looked at their short lives, their soft bodies, their young civilization, and we thought we understood. We were wrong. A new signal appeared on the communication panel. A shuttle was launching from one of the Prometheus's hangars. It moved with smooth precision, crossing the distance between the battlecruiser and the station in minutes. The council watched it approach. The shuttle was the size of a warship. It was merely a transport, a way to carry passengers from one place to another, and it was the size of a warship. The human delegation requests permission to dock, Ra reported. Granted, said before anyone else could speak. Guide them to the primary diplomatic bay. The next hour passed in tense silence. The council members spoke to each other in whispers, or they did not speak at all. Some contacted there through encrypted channels. Others simply stared at the Prometheus through the viewport, trying to understand what they were seeing. Hex used the time to search every database he could access. He found almost nothing. Humanity had been quiet neighbors. They kept to themselves. They traded with a few minor species on the rim. They asked for nothing. They threatened no one. But there were rumors, old reports from explorers and merchants who had traveled near human space, stories of battles fought in distant systems, tales of enemies who had attacked humanity and had never been seen again. Hex had dismissed those stories as exaggeration. Primitive species always inflated their victories. It was common, expected, nothing to worry about. He was no longer so certain. The doors to the council chamber opened. Every eye turned to watch as the human delegation entered. There were 3 of them, 2 aides in simple gray uniforms and one woman who walked slightly ahead. She was not tall. Her hair was gray, pulled back from her face. Her eyes were brown and calm. She wore the same simple uniform as her aides, marked only with a small insignia on her shoulder. She looked ordinary, completely, utterly ordinary. And that somehow made everything worse. High Arbiter, ambassadors. The woman's voice was clear and steady. She showed no fear, no nervousness, no awe at standing before the most powerful beings in the galaxy. I am captain of the United Earth Navy. Thank you for granting us this audience. Hex found his voice. Captain, your vessel. The Prometheus smiled slightly. She is our diplomatic flagship. I apologize if her presence has caused concern. We believed it was appropriate to send our best for such an important occasion. Diplomatic flagship. The delegate made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a cry of despair. "That is a warship. That is the largest warship any of us have ever seen." "Yes," agreed, "she is both. Is that unusual?" The council had no answer. In their experience, diplomatic ships were small and unarmed. They were symbols of peace. They showed that the species who sent them trusted their hosts not to attack. The Prometheus showed something very different. It showed that humanity trusted no one. It showed that humanity was always ready for war. And it showed that humanity was very, very good at war. Stepped forward. "Captain, I believe we have much to discuss." Captain walked to the center of the council chamber. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. The 12 most powerful beings in the galaxy watched her, and she moved as if she were walking through a park on a Sunday afternoon. Hex studied her carefully. He was looking for weakness, for fear, for anything that would explain how such an ordinary creature could command such an extraordinary vessel. He found nothing. "You have questions," said. It was not a question. "Many questions." His crystalline form pulsed with agitated light. "Your ship. We have no record of such vessels in human space. Our intelligence reports suggested your largest military craft were small patrol boats, 500 meters at most. Your intelligence was incomplete." "Clearly, how many ships like the Prometheus do you possess?" Paused. She seemed to be considering how much to reveal. Then she shrugged slightly, as if the answer did not matter. "The Prometheus is our 37th Titan-class battlecruiser. We currently have 112 in active service." The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted questions and accusations. The representative's containment suit bubbled violently. They slammed their wooden fist against the table, only remained still, watching with ancient, calculating eyes. 112 ships like the Prometheus. It was impossible. Building such vessels would require resources beyond imagination, crews numbering in the millions, industrial capacity that dwarfed entire civilizations. "You are lying," Hex said flatly. "You must be lying." "I am not." His voice remained calm. "I can provide documentation if you wish. Construction records, deployment schedules, crew manifests. The information is not classified. If you have such power, why have we never seen it? Why have you hidden?" "We did not hide. We simply did not advertise." Gestured, and her aides activated a holographic display. "Perhaps this will help explain." The display showed a star map. Human space was highlighted in blue, a small cluster of systems on the edge of the galaxy. But as spoke, other colors appeared. Red zones, battle sites, war zones. "First contact," said. "The year 2287 by our calendar, we encountered the Eth swarm." The council knew of the Eth, an ancient species of predators. They had terrorized the galaxy before vanishing suddenly 500 years ago. "The Eth attacked one of our colony ships, 40,000 civilians. They took no prisoners." His voice was steady, but something cold moved behind her eyes. "We responded." The display showed the battle. Human ships, small and crude by modern standards, throwing themselves against the swarm. Losses were catastrophic, but the humans kept coming. More ships, more soldiers, more weapons. The war lasted 9 years. When it ended, the Eth no longer existed as a species. Hex felt ice in his heart. The Eth had been one of the most dangerous species in galactic history. They had consumed entire civilizations, and humanity, young and weak humanity, had destroyed them completely. "That was our first war," continued. "It was not our last." The display changed. New enemies appeared, names the council did not recognize, species that had never reached known space because they had been stopped at the border of human territory. The Void Lords, masters of dark energy weapons, who had demanded humanity's surrender. Humanity had refused. The war lasted 12 years. The Void Lords' empire was dismantled, their worlds captured or destroyed. their survivors scattered to the far corners of the galaxy. The Stone Kings, silicon-based who reproduced by consuming planets, they had targeted Earth itself. The defense of had cost humanity 60 million lives, but the Stone Kings were gone now, every single one of them. The Crimson Fleet, a coalition of 5 hostile species who had united to crush the human threat. The siege had lasted 3 years. When it ended, humanity controlled all 5 species' former territories. More battles, more wars, more enemies who had looked at humanity and seen easy prey. Every single one of them had been wrong. 3 centuries, said quietly. We have been fighting for 3 centuries, not because we wanted to, because we had no choice. She looked around the chamber, meeting each delegate's eyes. Every species we encountered tried to destroy us. They saw our soft skin and short lives. They saw that we had no natural weapons, no special powers. They thought we were weak. They attacked. The display showed the current human fleet. Thousands of ships, carriers and destroyers and cruisers, and rising above them all, the Titan-class battlecruisers, mountains of metal built for a single purpose: survival. The Prometheus is not a threat, said. She is a scar. She is what happens when a species is pushed to the edge of extinction again and again. She is what happens when there is no one to help, no one to protect you, no one to call for aid. She is what happens when you must save yourself or die. Hex wanted to argue. He wanted to accuse her of aggression, of warmongering, of being the threat she claimed to fight against. But the words would not come. Because he understood suddenly what he was looking at. Humanity had not built the Prometheus to conquer. They had built her to survive. Every scar on that great hull was a battle they had never asked for. Every weapon was a response to enemies who had struck first. Every meter of armor was bought with blood and tears and desperate sacrifice. We are tired, said. The words were simple, honest, human. We are so very tired, we do not want to fight anymore. We want trade, we want diplomacy, we want peace. She spread her hands, empty and open. We want our children to grow up without learning how to kill before they learn to read. Is that so much to ask? The chamber was silent. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Galactic Council had no idea what to say. The Council called an emergency recess. It was the first time such a thing had happened in living memory. Even, who had lived for thousands of years, could not recall a moment when the great powers of the galaxy had been so shaken that they needed to stop and breathe. And her aides were escorted to a waiting room. She did not protest. She sat in a simple chair and folded her hands in her lap and waited. Her aides stood behind her, still and patient. They had the look of soldiers who had learned to wait through long watches and longer wars. In the private chambers behind the council hall, chaos reigned. Hex paced back and forth, his armored feet clicking against the floor. His mind raced through the implications of what he had heard. 112 Titan-class ships, a fleet that could challenge any power in the galaxy, and they had been hiding on the rim, fighting wars nobody knew about. We should have seen this, he said. We should have known. How? The delegate floated in their containment suit, water churning with agitation. They kept to themselves. They asked for nothing. We had no reason to look closely. We had every reason. A new species expanding rapidly, claiming world after world. We should have investigated. And if we had, the delegate stood by the window staring at the Prometheus. What would we have done? Attacked them. Look at that ship, Hex. Look at it and tell me what we could have done. Hex had no answer. Entered the chamber slowly. The High Arbiter's crystalline body was dim, the usual internal light muted to a soft glow. They looked old suddenly, very old. I have been thinking, said, about what we saw, about what it means. It means we have a problem, Hex snapped. A massive, heavily armed problem that we cannot control. No, shook their great head. It means we have been blind. It means we have looked at the galaxy and seen only what we expected to see. The High Arbiter moved to the window. The Prometheus hung in the darkness, patient and still. Light from the distant star reflected off its hull. We thought humanity was weak. We saw their soft bodies, their short lives, their lack of natural weapons. We measured them by our standards and found them wanting. But we were measuring the wrong things. What should we have measured? Their will, their determination, their refusal to die. Turn to face the others. Think about what they have done. Every species they met tried to destroy them. Every single one, the Eth, the Void Lords, the Stone Kings. All of them looked at humanity and saw food or slaves or enemies to be crushed, and humanity survived them all. The delegate made a bubbling sound. They did more than survive. They won, completely. The Eth are extinct. The Void Lord's empire is gone. The Stone Kings exist only in our history files. Yes, and that is what terrifies me. Heck, stop packing. Terrifies you. You think they will turn on us. No, that is not what terrifies me. Slight pulsed slowly. What terrifies me is the thought of what they endured. 3 centuries of constant war, billions of dead, children who grew up knowing that every day might be their last, generation after generation fighting for survival against enemies who wanted them gone. The High Arbiter's voice softened, and through all of that they never struck first. They never became the monsters they fought. They built their warships and trained their soldiers and won their battles, but they never lost themselves. They remained human. On the observation deck, a young officer named Ra stood at the viewport. She had finished her shift hours ago, but she could not leave. The Prometheus drew her eyes like a magnet draws iron. She had been taught, as all were taught, that strength meant armor and weapons and size. The bigger the predator, the more dangerous. The thicker the shell, the more protected. These were simple truths, obvious truths, truths that had guided her people for. But looking at the Prometheus, she began to understand that she had been wrong. The ship was huge, yes. The ship was armed, yes. But that was not what made it terrifying. What made it terrifying was what it represented: centuries of war, countless battles, enemies beyond counting, and humanity had faced them all. Not because they were strong, because they refused to be weak. Ra noticed something she had missed before. Along the spine of the great ship, letters were carved into the hull. They were enormous, each 150 meters tall. Her translator struggled for a moment, then rendered the words into her language. We came in peace, we will leave in peace, but we will not leave our people behind. She read the words again, and slowly she began to understand. The Prometheus was not a threat, it was a promise. It was humanity saying, we will protect what is ours. We will not start wars, but we will finish them. We will not attack the innocent, but we will defend them to the last breath. It was, in its strange and terrible way, the most peaceful message she had ever seen. Because it meant that if you did not threaten humanity, humanity would not threaten you. It meant that the greatest military power in the galaxy wanted nothing more than to be left alone. It meant that all those weapons and all that armor were not for conquest. They were for protection. Ra thought about her own people. They had built their empire through war and conquest. They had taken what they wanted from weaker species. They had never asked if it was right. They had never wondered if there was another way. And here were the humans who could have done the same, who had the power to take anything they wanted. And instead, they came to the council with open hands, asking for peace. Ra did not sleep that night. She stood at the viewport and watched the Prometheus, and she thought about what strength really meant. The council reconvened the next morning. The great chamber looked the same as it always had, with its curved walls and high ceiling and the circular table at its center. But something had changed. The air felt different. The delegates moved differently. They looked at each other with new eyes. Captain was brought back to the center of the chamber. She looked exactly as she had before. Calm, patient, ordinary, but the council no longer saw her as ordinary. They saw her as what she was, the representative of a species that had been forged in fire and had emerged unbroken. High Arbiter rose to speak. The crystalline being's light was brighter now, as if they had come to a decision during the long night. Humanity has petitioned for associate membership in the Galactic Council, said. Traditionally, this requires a probationary period of 500 standard years. The petitioning species must demonstrate wisdom, restraint, and contribution to galactic society. Only then are they considered for full membership. Nodded, she had expected this. 500 years was nothing to a species like thee or the, but for humans who lived less than a century each, it was generations. It was parents and children, and who would never see the fruits of this moment. She did not argue, she simply waited. However, continued, the Council has discussed the matter at length. We have reviewed the evidence. We have considered what we have learned. The High Arbiter paused. The chamber was utterly silent. Humanity has already demonstrated the qualities we seek, not through words but through actions. 3 centuries of war and you never struck first. 3 centuries of enemies and you never became what you fought. You had the power to conquer and you chose to protect. You had the strength to destroy and you built instead. Hex spoke next. His voice was rough as if the words were difficult to say. I came to this chamber prepared to reject your petition. I thought humanity was young and foolish and dangerous. I was wrong. He looked at directly. You could have come here with your fleets. You could have demanded membership at the point of a gun. We would have had no choice but to accept. Instead, you came with a single ship and asked politely. That is not weakness. That is strength beyond anything I have ever seen. The delegate bubbled agreement. My people value adaptation. We survive by changing, by flowing around obstacles. But humanity does not flow. Humanity endures. You face the obstacle and you do not move until it breaks, or you do. And somehow, you never break. One by one, the delegates spoke. Some praised humanity's resilience. Others admitted their own failures, their own blindness, their own assumptions. The whose people had conquered through slow, patient expansion said that humanity's rapid growth now made sense. They were not rushing. They were running for their lives, and they never stopped running. Finally, raised a hand for silence. We will now vote on humanity's petition. A simple majority is required for associate membership. A unanimous vote is required for full membership without probation. His heart beat faster. She controlled her expression, but inside she was trembling. Everything her people had suffered, everything they had sacrificed came down to this moment. Not for power, not for territory, just for the chance to stop fighting, just for the chance to rest. Those in favor of associate membership with standard probation. No hands rose. Felt her stomach drop. They were going to reject the petition entirely. All of this had been for nothing. Those in favor of full membership without probation. 12 hands rose, every single delegate, every single species. Unanimous. Stared, she could not speak, she could not move. Behind her, her aides were equally frozen. This was not what they had expected. This was not what anyone had expected. Smiled. It was a strange expression on a being of living crystal, but somehow it was warm. Humanity is hereby granted full membership in the Galactic Council. No probation, no waiting period, effective immediately. I do not understand, finally managed to say. Why? We came here expecting rejection. We came here expecting to be told to wait, to prove ourselves, to earn our place. Why are you giving us this? Because you have already earned it. Stepped forward and placed a crystalline hand on shoulder. The touch was cool and surprisingly gentle. Every species in this galaxy had to prove themselves. They fought wars, made sacrifices, built civilizations, but none of them did it alone. They had allies, friends, neighbors who helped them grow. The High Arbiter's voice was soft. Humanity had no one. You faced the darkness alone and you did not fall. That is something we have never seen before. That is something worthy of respect." Hex approached next. He was an intimidating figure, tall and armored and sharp, but his voice was almost kind. "The Council is not just a political body. It is a promise. We protect each other. We defend each other. We stand together." He extended one clawed hand toward. "From this day forward, humanity is not alone anymore. You have allies now. You have friends. When enemies come, and they will face not just humanity but all of us." Took his hand. Her grip was firm, her eyes steady. "We did not come here looking for protectors. We can fight our own battles." "We know." Hex's mandibles clicked in what might have been a smile. "That is why we want you on our side." The session ended with formal ceremonies and the signing of documents and the exchange of diplomatic pleasantries, but barely noticed any of it. Her mind was far away, thinking of all the people who had died to bring humanity to this moment. The soldiers and civilians, the mothers and fathers, the children who never grew up. They had not died for nothing. Their sacrifice had bought something precious, not just peace but acceptance, not just survival but belonging. As the human delegation returned to their shuttle, a young officer approached. Ra had been waiting outside the chamber for hours, hopping for this chance. "Captain," turned, "yes." "I wanted to say," Ra hesitated, "I read the words on your ship, the inscription. We came in peace. We will leave in peace, but we will not leave our people behind." "Yes, it is our oldest promise." "I think I understand now what humanity is, what you represent." Ra stood a little. "My people have always believed that strength means armor and weapons and size, but watching you, I think strength means choosing to protect instead of destroy, even when destroying would be easier." Smiled. It was the first genuine smile she had allowed herself all day. "You understand us better than most of our enemies ever did." "I hope I never become your enemy." "So do I." The shuttle carried the human delegation back to the Prometheus. As they approached the great ship, looked at its hull with new eyes. Every mark was a memory. Every patch was a story. The ship carried the weight of humanity's history, all the pain and loss and desperate courage that had brought them here. But now perhaps the Prometheus could rest. Perhaps all of humanity could rest. The Battlecruiser's engines ignited, painting the stars with brilliant light. Slowly, majestically, the great ship turned away from Harmony's cradle and prepared to jump to hyperspace. Hex watched from the station's observation deck. Beside him, stood in silent contemplation. "Do you think we made the right decision?" Hex asked. "I think we made the only decision we could." Slight pulsed thoughtfully. "Humanity was going to change the galaxy whether we welcomed them or not. At least now, they are our partners instead of our rivals. They are terrifying, Arbiter. All that power, all that strength, hidden behind such ordinary faces." "Yes, and that is exactly why I am glad they are on our side." The Prometheus vanished into hyperspace. The stars returned to their normal patterns. The great station continued its slow orbit as it had for 3,000 years. But nothing would ever be the same. In the council chamber, preparations began for the integration of humanity into galactic society. Trade agreements would need to be negotiated, military treaties drafted, cultural exchanges organized. There was much work to be done. And somewhere on the edge of known space, on a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star, a message arrived. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of 3 centuries of hope. "Membership granted, full status, effective immediately. We are no longer alone." In homes and schools and hospitals, in factories and farms and military bases, the people of Earth read those words and wept. Not tears of sadness, but tears of relief, tears of hope. The long night was over. The war for survival was won. And finally, at last, humanity could rest.